Hey everyone, Todd here, internalarchitect.com, and in this video I want to teach you a little bit about PTSD after cancer. Now I brought my daughter-in-law, Rayna Macias, here to talk about this with me because I think it's important to have a little insight from someone that is actually going to school as a social worker and is working to get her master's degree in social work also. So she's been a huge help in helping me figure out how to kind of discuss a lot of these topics that I go over on my channel here. And I just want to introduce you, Rayna. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on today.
Of course.
I think there's, this is kind of a touchy subject because PTSD is a really big issue right now, especially amongst like the military, and I think anyone that's really gone through a traumatic situation in their lives. And I think people can relate to this with cancer because of how much of a traumatic experience it is. Just want to get a quick thought on what you feel PTSD is, and then we can kind of go into what we feel, how it really relates to cancer.
Mm-hmm. So PTSD is basically an anxiety disorder that is to the extreme. So it's like everyday anxiety, but just like times a million, and these symptoms last a lot longer and take over your like everyday living. A lot of people with PTSD experience like chronic paranoia or fear or just like this great sense of worry, and it just is really debilitating.
Right. And I think that's where it really can make a lot of sense for cancer survivors because of this experience that they've gone through. It's really a traumatic experience, and it really all starts with diagnosis and the feelings that come along with diagnosis. Before you're diagnosed, you're kind of living this kind of life of, you might be happy, you might be wishing there's some change, whatever the situation is, and then all of a sudden, things take a real quick turn, and this whole thing of being diagnosed with cancer, and then next thing you know, like, your life is completely changed. And I really think that's kind of the start of how PTSD kind of starts, especially with cancer survivors.
Definitely. I think you're right. Like you keep saying, it's a very traumatic experience, and what people don't really know is that PTSD can pretty much come from any sort of trauma, not just like military or warfare type of situations. So yeah, definitely going through this experience thinking you're gonna die is gonna weigh on you and make you feel some sort of way, for sure.
Yeah, and having that first experience with your mortality is a really crazy experience.
Mm-hmm.
I went through it obviously because of my lymphoma, and so that's why I've really started really teaching everything I know about this, because it's hugely important, I think, for new cancer survivors. They really need to know these things. And then kind of going down the road here, we have a list of things that we both have talked about, and we're just going to kind of work through them all. The next part of this is the feeling. When you're diagnosed, you may have been feeling a lot of, you may not have been feeling very well. You're starting to feel kind of, maybe you've lost some weight, maybe you're just not sleeping well, or you have night sweats or itches, or, got some, just whatever it is, things weren't normal to begin with. And then you go through the diagnosis, and I remember the first thing I felt when I was diagnosed was just finally relief of knowing what was wrong with me. After a little bit of time, it shifted over to like, holy shit, I got cancer. And that's where it really kind of became hard. And I think that's where it's really, and you can probably help explain this a little bit too, is like that shift is really kind of a tough tough thing for people to swallow,
Mm-hmm.
like all of a sudden they know what they have. It's a big relief, and then it's like they have to deal with the stigma of what cancer is and what it has been for the last century or so.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of patients develop this like warrior mentality at the beginning of their diagnosis, and just feel that they're supposed to be like the most upbeat and happy, positive person there is until they're finished. And unfortunately, it's not that experience for everybody, and everyone handles illness differently. So there, like you said, there's this stigma out there that cancer patients are all supposed to be a certain way, and they're all deathly ill, and they're all gonna die, and there's no way out. And definitely once you get that first treatment, it makes it all real, and that's when that whole mind set definitely shifts, because it's all right in front of your face.
Yeah, and that's cool that you mentioned the mindset, because when you're right, you really, you feel there's a moment of empowerment that goes on, once you feel this, and once you start kind of down the treatment road. And then as you start treatment and you start to feel the effects of whether you're doing chemotherapy or natural therapy or however it is, it becomes really real into the fact that you are battling a really, really nasty disease. And that's the thing about cancer. There's so many different ones. I had lymphoma. I've lost friends to pancreatic and lung cancer and ovarian. So it doesn't really matter. I kind of generalize cancer as one whole thing, because it's a nasty, nasty disease, and that's why there is a stigma to it. And so I think it's important for people to understand that when you are now facing this, yes, at first you are like, okay, I'm going to fight this, I'm going to do this. But once you start going down the treatment road, things change, and you start to really feel the effects of what cancer can do. And so, kind of all the feelings that go along with treatment is kind of how that mindset shifts a little bit, because first you're really, really, really empowered. And then you start to feel angry, and you start to feel these different feelings of like, why me? And then you start to, you go through a lot of different feelings and emotions because you're going through it. Now, I don't know, I think you can really kind of help some people understand this a little bit, because there's a shift there that really happens, and you're right, it is the mindset side of it, of how important it is to at least understand the big picture when you're going into the big fight like this.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think just basically the basic as you can say is mental health is just as important as physical health.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not really looked at when you're going through something like cancer, because it is so like bodily focused, and you're trying to fight those physical illnesses rather than the ones going on up in your head.
Sure.
But as I was doing some research, a lot more cancer treatment centers are trying to implement mental health services, because unfortunately it is what like can make or break you pretty much. And
Yeah.
not even while you're dealing with cancer, afterwards it can take a huge toll on you. And I think it just needs to be recognized while you are getting diagnosed, through just basically every step of the way. Checking on where you're at mentally is totally as much as important as where you are physically.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I didn't have that when I was going through it. Not at least every day. I was given the opportunity to talk to some people during
Mm-hmm.
my treatment, and that was a little bit later as I was going through my stem cell transplant. I had the opportunity to talk to some therapists while I was in the hospital, as I was the boy in the bubble, so to say. So that was there. It's good that those resources are becoming more available for cancer patients in the middle of their treatment. The feelings, and I want to kind of touch back on some of these feelings, where once you're diagnosed, and then you go through all the doctors, all the pre treatment testing and everything that really kind of can wreak a lot of havoc on your psyche. And that goes from just all the lead up in the scan, from the testing all the way up to the first day of infusion, and then going through each infusion and having the anxiety that comes up with each one, knowing that, like, I have 11 more to do, I have 10 more to do, and as the countdown kind of works. And then as you're able to kind of think through these things, you have a lot of time on your hands to start really figuring out how you want to battle this mentally, and having someone to be able to talk to is hugely important. And I think it's important to be able to discuss your feelings and where you're at, emotionally and psychologically, to people as you're going through it, because the mental health side of this is a big game that you need to play. I remember the days after infusions, I was just really, there were times where I was just, I kind of went through a lot of different stuff. There was days where I was just bedridden and didn't want to do anything, and then there was days where I was really motivated and wanted to get out and do good things and get out and move and exercise a little bit. And I remember those days a lot clearer than the days that I didn't. And maybe some of it was mindset, and maybe some of it was just pure, my give a fuck was broken. And that's okay to kind of feel those feelings as you're going through it. The biggest one, though, is you get a lot of attention as you're going through all this treatment. You are being waited on hand and foot by the nurses and just even the oncologists and everyone that kind of is part of the whole medical team that you deal with. And then even your family members and your friends are all really there. They're all really caring. They're all putting a lot of time and effort into your well-being because they all care. And then once you are done with all this treatment and you are either cancer free, depending on the cancer, or you live in remission like I do, all that kind of goes away. And that's where the PTSD really starts to come into play, I think. And I think having all that attention at one point, for at least a year, for me it was about a year, and then all of a sudden it kind of stopped. And I'm not saying that it like stopped. My family still cared. There was, my friends were still really interested in what was going on, but I just wasn't getting that attention anymore. Maybe you can kind of help shed a little light on kind of the big change of happenings that goes on when you shift out of being a patient to a survivor.
Yeah. Well, like, if you think of it as when you were like 5 and getting a cold and your mom takes care of you, that's like the best feeling in the world, and everyone's waiting on you hand and foot. So I can imagine that is very easy to accommodate to that kind of lifestyle. And yeah, when you get out and then you're hit with reality, it's very harsh. Yeah.
So would it be easier, do you think it's easier for people to help them get back into real life after going through treatment, after being waited on hand and foot, is to kind of give them some ways of adapting to real life after cancer? And I guess that would be doing some things. Obviously you just went through really, really tough battle. You've made it through. I can't speak for everyone, but I know that for a number of people I've talked to, it has changed them to a point to where they're doing everything they can to learn about ways to not get cancer back, and to physically do what they can to not get cancer back also. Do you think that's a healthy way for people to kind of to start working back into regular life as a new survivor?
I think so. Doing it as independently as you can, or the way you want to. Of course, always have that support system behind you, because that's what's going to be your base. But for, reintegrating yourself into regular society, I would say trying to be as independent and just going at your own pace and learning how to basically live life again on your own.
Sure.
Is important, because everyone could tell you to go back to your old job or do this, do that, go to school, but your life literally just took a giant change, and trying to jump back into your old life is very difficult.
And do you think that's how some PTSD people really, it really becomes really hard for them, because instead of understanding and adapting to the new normal, they try to get back into what they think was the old normal, and then nothing's the same, and they have a hard, it just kind of makes the entire process a lot more difficult.
Definitely, because I think one of the like biggest symptoms of PTSD for cancer survivors is the fear of just like having it come back. So I think they feel either very strongly about changing who they were in what before cancer, or just staying the same and not really changing. Either way, I feel like those are two extremes that shouldn't be taken. Rather, they should just kind of find, like I said, their happy medium and where they feel their path is again.
And that's where I think finding balance in life is really, really important. Now,
definitely,
there's not really a good way to kind of go right back into regular life. I mean, you need to almost re-socialize yourself slowly to start just being able to readapt to kind of normal society again. I know I had to take my time to kind of work back into it, and it took a while. You know, there's no doubt about it, and being patient with that really made a big difference. I do remember just that resocialization side for me was really key in feeling comfortable when I was able to go out and meet friends, whether that was, you know, going on the hill snowboarding, or you know, meeting for a beer after work, or after whatever I was doing, you know. So that it's really key to be cautious in how quickly you jump back into things, and to be aware that you're not just jump 100% right back into what you think real life should be like, because it has all completely changed. What would you say 2 ways to help prevent a little bit of PTSD? I mean, we're gonna go through it, right?
yeah.
We're gonna have some fears of the reoccurrence. There's fears always going to, like, I still am fearful of having a reoccurrence to this day, and I'm 8 years in remission right now. There's always going to be something in the back of my head that just sits there, and it's, you know, there's that statistical chance of me having it again. And for someone who is really new to this, what would be 2 good ways to kind of work your way back in to start really alleviating some of that fear, and to alleviate the PTSD that's going to come along with going through such a traumatic experience?
I think first of all, developing a great support team is crucial. Having those people that will have your back and understand what you're going through and be there for you when you are experiencing those fears is something that a lot of people need. Unfortunately, this is really hard to beat by yourself, so having some people you can trust is honestly one of the greatest things you could do. And second, I would say just kind of becoming more aware, learning more about yourself and what does trigger those fears, what brings them up, and then sometimes immersing yourself in those situations can kind of get you over that, or just talking with someone about that certain fear. Or like you said, every cancer survivor is gonna have that fear in the back of their mind, but if it's taking over your everyday life, then that's when it should be discussed and looked at a little closer.
Sure, absolutely. You know, we've been able to discuss this for the last couple weeks, actually. And one of the, you know, if I was to add some 2 cents, 2 ways also, one of them is to live a little bit more in the moment. And that kind of does a number of things. The main one is it kind of helps keep you from feeling like there's no way out, you know. And by what I mean by living in the moment is not really trying to foresee what your life is going to look like, you know, tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now. It's really just spending the time living in the moment and living in the right now. And it's a little bit of a tough challenge to do, but it really makes a big difference in kind of seeing the entire the entire spectrum unfold for you. I guess it's a way to kind of see kind of how the future will unfold by just looking at the moment. And it's maybe it's just my own weird way of thinking of things, but I really find that when I'm struggling with something, I have to kind of bring it all back and start looking at things a lot more in this moment, and it helps me figure out kind of the problems that are going on, and I can kind of assess how I need to solve them. And that's been a really good way. And then kind of to add, and the second thing for me is to add on to what you were saying too, is if you really are starting to feel frustrated and down, is by all means go seek out some higher level professional help, because that is the place where you can really kind of unload the things that are going on in your head and in your heart also, to help you kind of work through those things. And the professional help they're skilled enough to know how they can help you too, and give you some very key resources and tools to help you work through the next little bits and pieces that you're struggling with. Yeah, I think I think PTSD it's a very real thing with cancer survivors.
I saw today that about 1 in 5 survivors experience PTSD from their cancer experience.
Yeah, and it's and just knowing through my own experience how important it was to have the support group. And it sucks because I actually know a small handful of people that are going through cancer right now that don't have the support group that I did. And that's the other thing of what I'm trying to also build here with Internal Architect, is a place for other people to kind of have to talk about their experience, to tell their stories, and to be able to relate to other like-minded people. And there are cancer support groups and support groups throughout the country, and in your even your local neighborhood, and that are community based, which are really, really good, and I highly recommend you check them out also. And you should be able to find those through your local media and whatever, and just even in the phone book, and Google it too. There are many ways to be able to get around people that have gone through the experience, and that way it'll give you a little bit of chance to relate to other people that have gone through this experience, and you will feel a little bit more open to talking with them also. How strongly do you feel it is important for people that might be suffering from PTSD to get around other people that have been through a similar experience?
Oh, I think it's extremely important. Most people think that PTSD is some kind of, you're some weirdo who is afraid of life and can't move on, but really it's more common than people think. And if you can find those people who share your experience, I feel it's so much more empowering, because you have someone who knows exactly how you're feeling and can help you, and you can help them. And I just think it needs to be expressed more and talked about, and no longer hidden, because these people are just suffering from unfortunate incident, and they can't live their life to the fullest anymore, and that's not the way it should be.
And that's what we're trying to change, is to get, it kind of comes back down to business and mentality also. You want to be surrounding yourself with like-minded people, and that goes the same for cancer survivors. You want to get around and make friendships with and relationships with other people that have gone through the experience, because it gives you someone to relate to, and to talk about the experience is with someone that understands you. I think that's hugely important, especially for someone going through PTSD, and trying to get someone that has PTSD to do these things is also a challenge too. There's the opportunity for them to really kind of duck back into their shell and not want to talk about it, which is, I think, extremely hard and harsh for their own for their own sake. It's important to get these people to talk about their experience. I know it has been incredibly beneficial for myself and for other people that I've coached. By them telling their stories, they have actually felt a lot more liberated and have actually been able to find a little bit more balance in their life too, because they're not holding it all in, right? And I think that's a hugely important part to this whole PTSD with cancer side of things too.
I just wanted to add, as someone who has struggled with mental health issues before, you are not alone in any sort of sense, not just PTSD, and to always seek out help and treatment, because it is so important to your everyday life, and that you are not alone 100%. Everyone feels these feelings.
Awesome. No, and she's absolutely right. By all means, reach out. There's so many resources out there for not just cancer, not just for everyone in every situation, and cancer survivors and people going through mental health challenges as a cancer survivor also, so by all means take the time to really reach out if you're feeling stuck, and if you're stuck in that rut, to do that. So yeah, this is a really important topic, and that's why I really wanted to have Rayna come on and discuss her point of view with PTSD and with what it takes to kind of go through the mental challenges of going through cancer as a survivor. So Rayna, I want to thank you for coming on and partaking with this. I know this is the first time on video, and I'm proud of you for doing it. So
thank you. Thanks for having me.
So if you have any questions or comments, hit me in the comment section below. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video, and I just want to say thank you again, and I really, really appreciate your time and your energy into watching the videos, and just thank you so much for your support with the development of the channel. And I will see you on the next video soon.